The rise of ADHD really highlights the failure of the modern world. It's incredible how we have been conditioned to think that ADHD is just one of those things, almost normal for a significant amount of children to be medicated for it. I'm not convinced that medicalizing ADHD to the extent that we do is all that helpful. That is not to say the symptoms are not real for those who get diagnosed with it. But in my opinion, those symptoms are a behavioral manifestation that some people exhibit when bombarded with unnatural and unhealthy aspects of modern living and modern society. But rather than addressing the root causes, we label those affected, then medicate them, and carry on as if everything is normal. It all has a very dystopian feel about it to me. Children with ADHD are truly the victims of the modern world. When I see a kid with the symptoms of ADHD in clinic, it's really frustrating that I do not have enough time to even begin to address the potential factors involved. So I wanted to brainstorm some of the root causes that I think are at play. Even if you don't have ADHD or know anyone who is diagnosed with it, many of the factors driving ADHD will be impacting you, whether you realize it or not. So what is ADHD? Let's look to the NHS page for some guidance. ADHD is a condition that affects people's behaviour. People with ADHD can seem restless, may have trouble concentrating, and may act on impulse. I always get a tad suspicious when a condition gets defined by just listing some symptoms. The exact cause of ADHD is unknown, but the condition has been shown to run in families. So we can't define the disease and can't tell you what causes it. Let's shift the focus to genetics. This is actually quite a common pattern in modern medicine, having an unclear cause and then alluding to genetics. Conditions with an unknown cause are great for drug companies because management often involves taking a drug long term in order to paper over the symptoms whilst never actually arriving at a cure. You can't address the root cause in order to solve the problem if you don't know what the root causes are. Blaming things on genetics is really overplayed in the modern world. Of course, what affects parents is more likely to affect their children because they tend to inhabit the same environment and have passed on similar patterns of living to their kids. That's not really genetics though, is it? And even if people are genetically predisposed to get ADHD, they only actually develop it once exposed to abnormal environmental triggers. Once again, that is more environmental than genetic. Do you think cavemen had ADHD? Maybe they did and were just underdiagnosed? Research has also identified a number of possible differences in the brains of people with ADHD when compared to those without the condition. Not quite sure what you're supposed to take away from that. Other factors suggested as potentially having a role in ADHD include being born prematurely, having a low birth weight, smoking or alcohol or drug abuse during pregnancy. So we do now have an acknowledgement that environmental factors are likely to be in play, but is that really the extent of it? I think there is a lot more going on with ADHD than the public are being made aware of. So let's go through some possible contributing factors. I've divided them into 4 categories. It's certainly not an exhaustive list. Let me know in the comments of any significant ones that I've missed. For most people with ADHD, it's likely to be a combination of multiple factors. Many of the factors can both worsen ADHD symptoms or contribute to its development in the first place. Firstly, neurodevelopmental factors. Low birth weight and premature birth were mentioned as risk factors, but not C-section or lack of breastfeeding, which is pretty odd because they are very significant factors which have huge impacts on neurodevelopment and ADHD risk. Smoking, alcohol, and drug abuse during pregnancy were mentioned, but not exposure to pharmaceutical drugs. I've linked my video on paracetamol, aka Tylenol, in the description, where I discuss how even a drug thought of as safe in pregnancy and childhood has been linked to multiple conditions, including ADHD, when taken at those times of life. Endocrine disrupting environmental toxins are another important factor since they tend to be neurotoxic and damage the gut microbiome, both of which can contribute to the development of ADHD. These include pesticides such as glyphosate, which permeate the food supply unless you're eating organic food, as well as pollution, phthalates found in plastics and cosmetics, think maternal exposure during pregnancy, PFAS chemicals such as are found in non-stick cookware, video linked in the description for that topic, and flame retardants, commonly found in many synthetic household materials, including sofas and mattresses. Next, onto sleep. This is a huge factor in ADHD. Poor sleep can easily be misdiagnosed as ADHD because they both give the same symptoms, especially in children. There is a significant correlation between ADHD and poor sleep quality, as well as late bedtimes, which tend to signify disrupted circadian rhythms. Artificially shifting your circadian rhythm due to a lack of bright outdoor light during the daytime and exposure to artificial lights and screens after sunset significantly worsens sleep quality. If you are wondering what I'm referring to here, I've done a video on that which I've linked in the description. Insufficient daytime exercise is another way to worsen sleep quality. Lack of exercise could really be its own category as a significant factor in a lot of ADHD cases. Mouth breathing has a big overlap with ADHD. Mouth breathing is bad for health in all ages. My previous video covered this, again linked in the description. But one significant part of the problem is that mouth breathing at night worsens sleep quality. If a child is doing that long term, they are far more likely to get diagnosed with ADHD. Mouth breathing is a problem that always needs addressing because it usually indicates the nose is blocked, and that means there is an underlying problem, anything from allergies to damp or mold in bedrooms to poor diet. If symptoms of poor sleep are diagnosed as ADHD in a child, then a stimulant medication like Ritalin may be prescribed. And no prizes for guessing what one of the most common side effects for a stimulant medication is? Yup, problems sleeping. I doubt there is ever a situation in which nutrition is not involved in some way regarding ADHD. The diet of someone with ADHD symptoms will impact the severity of those symptoms. But remember, it often starts with a pregnant or breastfeeding mother's nutrition and the effect that has on their baby's development. Examples of problematic foods include all artificial ingredients, which damage the gut microbiome whilst providing no nutritional value. Sugar, quite an obvious one when observing the effect on children. The fructose half of sugar has a direct impact on brain development and brain function, all negative of course. Long-chain omega-3s, as in oily fish or cod liver, should make up a significant proportion of your brain tissue, and so no surprises that a lack in the diet worsens brain function and brain development. Excess poor quality omega-6 intake, as is common in the modern Western diet due to the prevalence of seed oils, will block omega-3 utilization in the body. All these points need careful consideration during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Seed oils, sugar, and artificial ingredients are all prevalent in processed foods, and if you want a foolproof guide to spotting and avoiding all overly processed foods, I've linked my book in the description which covers all that. Sufficient maternal intake of fat-soluble vitamins is also very important for a baby's brain development, as well as brain health and general health during all stages of life. Lack of fat-soluble vitamins in childhood can also cause mouth breathing, but I will cover all that in my next video and link it in the description once done. Please do check it out as it's such an important part of nutrition that most people are unaware of. And finally, on to stress. Childhood stress is often involved in ADHD, but once again, it can even start before birth since maternal stress impacts neurodevelopment and ADHD risk. Many of the rest of the stress factors I've listed here are my opinion. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Poor family relationships will of course cause stress to children. In my opinion, a lack of discipline represents a stress on children who actually do much better with sensible and clearly defined boundaries, just like adults. Clutter has a negative effect on the brain of all ages, and for kids that includes excess toys, especially overly stimulating ones. Screens should probably be a category of their own, quite clearly not good for anyone's brain, especially the brain of a developing child. Premature separation from mum can be very stressful for children, such as early childcare or nursery. In schools, increasing exam pressure, peer pressure fueled by social media, and even hyperstimulation from huge class sizes, I think can all play a role. And all those values of the modern world, such as materialism, individualism, and obsession with image, are impacting us all, starting at ever younger ages. We are also initiating kids into the constant rush and busyness of the modern world at ever younger ages too. And most of these factors come at the expense of proper relationships, deep purpose, and more wholesome activities at a slower, more sustainable pace of life. Any factor that affects adults also impacts children, who feed off of the energy of their parents and of society as a whole. And finally, ever more disconnect from nature with all its stress-reducing properties that is so often replaced with a stress-inducing urban landscape. This might all seem complicated, but basically all these factors relate to aspects of modern living that humans, for most of history, have not been exposed to, at least not at our current levels. And of course, health services and governments are completely incapable of addressing the enormity of all these problems. And it's often governments, along with big corporations and celebrity culture, who have encouraged the adoption of warped values and unhealthy lifestyles. What is required is a complete rethink of our values, our living environments, our schooling, and our social structures, and our approach to health and healthcare. Otherwise, rates of ADHD will just continue to climb. If you have symptoms of ADHD or are a parent with a child with symptoms, then you need to become your own detective and work on as many of these factors as possible, because unfortunately, nobody else is going to do it for you. If you're in that situation, then I hope this video helps. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time.